we're Tony and Chelsea, and we're going to tell you which settings you need to get sharper, better wildlife photos.
It's not all about buying the biggest, most expensive gear. You can improve your photos way more by just developing some techniques. So we have some really advanced techniques as well as some beginner techniques that we're going to cover in this video.
But first we want to thank our sponsor KEH for making this video possible and for making buying great gear possible at affordable prices. If you're looking for new cameras, new lenses, and you want to upgrade, you can go to KEH and get a great deal on used gear, and they have a generous return period and warranty. So check them out. Thanks KEH. We have our links for 5% off in the description down below, and our coupon code is always changing, so be sure to look down there in the description to find out what it is. There's no one set of settings that will be correct, and there's no one way to configure your camera that's correct, but you have to start somewhere, and then you should be tweaking things to figure out what works for you. I love to set my camera mode into shutter priority because that allows me to quickly adjust my shutter speed depending on what the animal's doing. If the bird is perched, then my shutter speed is as low as possible so I don't get a noisy photo. But as soon as the animal moves, I like to then be able to just quickly dial up my shutter speed, and that ensures that I could get a sharp photo no matter what the animal is doing. When I have my camera set into shutter priority mode, I have a few other things set up that go well with that. One is auto ISO, and that means my camera is going to choose the lowest ISO possible for the situation. So if my shutter speed's low, then ISO will also be low. If I have to crank it up to 1/3000th of a second, my ISO will go up to expose the photo properly, but it's still going to keep that ISO as low as it possibly can. I just went to take pictures of an osprey diving, and it wasn't going well. And it's because this is Tony's camera and it was set up for a solar eclipse. But my loss is your gain because there are very important settings that I should have had on that will help you. One of them is continuous autofocus. So if you're trying to track the bird and the autofocus point is just staying in one spot instead of tracking it, you'll find that you'll have to keep readjusting and refocusing. So continuous autofocus, or AFC here, is going to make sure that you're continually getting your subject in focus. The other thing that I use is the high plus.
On your camera, select the shutter mode that supports the highest frames per second while also supporting continuous autofocus and RAW.
Once you have those things selected, you'll want to choose your autofocusing type. This is where it gets a little bit difficult for me to explain to you what to do because it's going to depend on your camera body. I have the Sony Alpha 1 here, and so I put it into autofocus with animal detection bird. And you're gonna have those options with a few different cameras. I won't name them all, but it'll be like the Z8, the Z9, you know, the list will continually change with time. You'll have to look up if you have that. If you have an older DSLR like a D500 or a D850 Nikon, you want to choose the 3D tracking. That works pretty well. Otherwise, if you find that the intelligent autofocus on your camera is not working great, you can always choose a single point and then you do the work. That's what I used to do with my DSLR before I got lazy with all this cool tracking technology. It works well, it just takes some practice. So be patient, practice on the seagulls, practice on the common birds, and then when you get cool action coming along, you will be ready. Another thing you want to do is make sure that you select your file type to RAW. And you want to do this because you want to make sure when you take your picture and you drag it into your editing app, you're able to fully recover shadows and highlights. So if you're shooting in JPEG, you will be limiting that ability, which means your photo might not look as good. And a tip about settings that I want to mention, now that you've seen my folly with trying to shoot with Eclipse settings, is that you can set your modes on your camera, which is something I'm going to do now and something I should have done long before. And that means that I could have set 1 to wildlife and dialed everything in, set 2 to Eclipse, I guess that's oddly specific, 3 to portraits, whatever you want to do. But either way, just flipping to 1, 2, or 3 in your modes is way easier than what I had to do, which was go and change every single setting manually. And it's easy to forget one sometimes. So program your modes, Tony. I leave that job to Tony. Another setting I want to talk about is your exposure compensation, and that's this dial right here with the zeros and the pluses and the minuses. I use this to make sure that my frame is exposed properly for my subject. When your camera is trying to assess how to properly expose your frame, there's an osprey. They only come out when I'm filming a video. If I were here just shooting like I was this morning, they were just all, what were you guys doing then? Nothing. You were doing nothing. Anyway, If you want to make sure that your frame is exposed properly, you want to expose it for your subject. So here's an example. There's actually an egret right here behind Tony. And when I point my camera at the scene, it exposes properly for most of the scene. But the egret's actually overexposed because it's all white. So what I do is I drop my exposure compensation down by however much I need to make sure that those highlights in the bird's whitest feathers are not clipped. Probably going to be about a stop on a gray day like this. If it's a super bright day, it could be a couple of stops to make sure you're not overexposing it. Conversely, if you have a black bird on the sky, like it's happening over here with the flying cormorant, it's going to expose for, oh my God, diving. You're going to dive right in front of me. No, he picked up false alarm, everybody. He just got seaweed. It's kind of cool. Conversely, if you have a black or dark bird flying on a bright white cloudy sky like this, then they might just appear as a silhouette, and then you can bump your exposure compensation up a stop or two, whatever you need. And that's just ensuring you're exposing for your subject, not stuff around it. Wildlife tip. Wildlife, they're like cats or teenagers. They're going to come around when you pretend you don't care about them. So maybe bring like a crossword puzzle or something. Just be like, I don't care, bird. I am doing something else. I'm busy. I don't have time for bird. They're all going to start doing cool stuff.
Here's two common misconceptions even the most experienced photographers have. They think high ISO causes noise, and they think noise causes little speckles. Both of those are not really true. This gets a little bit technical, but I promise it's valuable. Now, when we talk about noise, we think of the little speckles in the image, but those can always be eliminated with denoise algorithms. And in fact, you probably should be doing that. I would always edit my photos in Adobe Lightroom Classic and use the denoise feature to eliminate as much noise as possible. Now, once you equalize the amount of speckles, the noise, the difference you see is actually in detail, not in noise. If you want sharper images, you want them to be at a low ISO. Now, you don't get there by adjusting the ISO. The ISO is more like a gauge. Thus, you produce lower noise, sharper images by using longer and longer shutter speeds. So those rules you've heard of just using like 1/3000th or 1/2000th for everything, forget that. You want the longest shutter speed you can possibly shoot with. For still subjects, I will start at 1/250th of a second and work my way down to 1/25th of a second, taking hundreds of shots just to make sure that I get one that's sharp, because you only need the one shot. For flying birds, I usually start at 1/2000th, but then I'll work my way down to even 1/250th of a second or slower. Now, if you have a camera with a high frames per second, like this Canon R5 at 20 frames per second, that means you can use a longer shutter speed because you don't need every shot to be sharp. You can take 20 frames every second and just pick one. So you just need the one shot to be sharp. If you can go from 1/500th to 1/250th, that's a one-stop benefit. That's the same as going from APS-C to full frame. That's the same as going from f5.6 to f4. In other words, high ISO doesn't cause noise. A lack of light causes noise. I'll take a few pictures and show you exactly how this works. These three pictures were all taken at the same ISO. I only varied the shutter speed. These photos are all raw, so we can adjust the exposure in post. I'll equalize the exposure, photo, develop settings, match total exposures. Now we can compare the image quality. Look how much better the image at 1/1000th looks than the image at 1/8000th of a second. Again, these are both ISO 125. And as I used longer shutter speeds, I got even better quality. Here at 1/125th of a second, there's even less noise. And because the camera was able to shut the aperture down to f9, I have more depth of field and sharper details. Camera settings and technique make a huge difference, but your gear matters too. If you can go to KEH, you could pick up some used gear that can really produce much better results. Like old 500 f4 lenses for your camera can produce virtually the same results as a big modern $13,000 600 f4, but you can get them for like $3,000 or $4,000.
Yeah, you might even find that making a lateral move with your camera or lens could produce better results. So you could be paying the same price, but getting better photos. So if you're looking for tips or advice on which gear to get for wildlife, we also have videos on that. But once you make your decision, go to KEH and get the best deal possible. And you can use our coupon code to get 5% off. It's down in the description below, and it's always changing, so be sure to check it out. Choosing your shutter speed is actually going to be kind of personal to you, your technique, your ability to hand hold, but also your style. You may choose to do a slower shutter speed and show motion and be willing to throw away most of your photos to get one one that has the eyes in focus and the rest of the animal kind of blurred. But a good rule to figure out where you are on that spectrum of shutter speed is to use multiple shutter speeds when you're shooting. So something that I'll do is I'll start higher than I think I need to make sure I can freeze the action. I really want to get the shot. I don't want to risk missing it. I use the high shutter speed, and I'll be sacrificing some sharpness because I'm going to be introducing some noise because a high shutter speed will be cutting the light. Then I lower it down. I go from the highest, maybe 1/3000th to 1/2000th, and maybe risk introducing some motion. And then if I'm really experimenting and willing to go slow, I'll try something like 1/1000th and try to smoothly pan and see if I can get most of the animal in focus. But what you should do is try all different shutter speeds, go and review your photos, and then see what's working for you. You might find that you consistently need a high shutter speed. You might need to work on your technique more and be more smooth and not get so excited. When I first started, I'd get so excited, I'd be shaking all over. So try to figure that out and pay attention to where you're getting the results that you like the most. I know we're talking a lot about settings, and that can be the most intimidating part of starting your wildlife photo journey, but something really important are your habits and your technique. And I was here earlier this morning taking pictures, and there were a lot of osprey, but they were not fishing. Now there's a lot of osprey, and every single one of them is fishing. You'll have to go out every single day and enjoy the process in order to make yourself do that. So the journey of taking the pictures is just as important as taking them. And you can see I'm very distracted. I really like watching the birds, and that's a huge part of it. And that's because I understand animal behavior. So if you're finding there's a species you're interested in, don't be afraid to go online and look up what they eat, where they hang out, talk to other people who are interested in photo groups or even fishing groups sometimes. Birding groups are great. And you'll find out where to go to get the best photos possible. Oh, another thing I want to mention that I've noticed over my years of shooting is that you want to be comfortable, and it sounds small and insignificant, but if you're cold, you're going to leave a lot earlier than if you're comfortable. So bring a chair if you need to, bundle up, be warmer than you think you need to be because you're not moving a lot. So when you're still, you tend to get cold easier. Bring bug spray if you're in a hot place. You could bring shade. Make sure that you're very comfortable, dressed appropriately, waterproof shoes, and you'll be more likely to stay longer, which means you'll be more likely to get a good shot. What a little show off.
If you're looking for the sharpest wildlife pictures, my top tip isn't about gear or settings, but it's about the lighting. You really want your subject to be front lit. That means you want clear skies and the sun behind you. That's really going to make them pop. Now you can get amazing backlit photos. Sometimes they're really beautiful, but they're just not going to be that sharp because if the sun is behind your subject, that means they're only being lit by reflected light, and reflected light is never quite as direct. If you look at these side-by-side shots, the front light photos just look sharper. They have the colors really pop in them. So when you go out, think about where the sun is in relation to your subject, like where you're going to be pointing the camera. I'll even go to different spots at different times of day so I can get the best light possible. You'll also get better results when the sun is low in the sky. It means you should get up early for sunrise and hang out while the sun sets.
One of the most exciting things about photography and wildlife photography is that you're always learning and changing and finding new techniques. If you have a technique that we didn't cover in this video, share it down below. I love this community. I love that we can all give each other tips. So don't be shy with them and tell your fellow photographers how to get better photos. If you want more videos like this, let us know in the comments down below. And of course, don't forget to like and subscribe so that you can support us and you can learn and we can just all get along.
Speaking of supporting us, check out our sponsor KEH. They're the world's biggest used camera and lens store, and they have gear that can really improve your photos. In addition to those techniques, getting a little closer, getting a faster lens like this, getting a camera with good mirrorless autofocus, KEH has all sorts of deals like that, and they'll give you the best possible price with a warranty and with a return period, so there's no risks. Be sure to start at our link here and then use our coupon code. Get the latest coupon code from the description. That supports them and that supports us.
It also saves you 5%, so it's helping everybody. Thanks so much, KEH, and thanks to all of you for watching.
Don't forget to subscribe. Bye.